Welcome back to the Horror Shack. As you settle in for a night of chilling tales, have you ever had one of those nights when you can't quite tell if what's happening around you is real? Like something feels off, but you can't exactly put your finger on it. That's how it started for me tonight. We'll explore true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. But first, we would love you to comment where you're listening from and what time is it currently for you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more spine-tingling episodes. Now let's get comfy. It was one of those stormy nights. I remember the rain was coming down so hard, I could hear it pounding against my window. And when the thunder cracked, it was like it shook the entire house. Every time lightning flashed, my whole room would light up, just for a second, casting these weird shadows all over the walls. It was almost hypnotizing. I don't know about you, but I've always found storms kind of soothing. There's something about listening to the rain, all warm and comfortable in your bed, while outside it's just chaos. But this time, I don't know, something felt different. I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like something was watching me. Have you ever felt that? Like, no matter how many times you tell yourself it's all in your head, you just know that something's off? I tried to ignore it and just go to sleep. But then, right as I was drifting off, I heard it, a soft voice, almost a whisper, right outside my window. And I swear it was saying my name. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. It's just the wind, right? Or maybe the rain hitting the glass in a weird way. I told myself the same thing. I mean, it had to be, right? But the whisper, it was so clear. And the way it said my name, it was like, I don't know, almost familiar, but in this really unsettling way. Like someone was trying to get my attention, but didn't want to be seen. I lay there, frozen, just listening. I told myself to ignore it. After all, what could it possibly be? But the whisper didn't stop. It kept coming again and again, my name being spoken so softly, almost tenderly, like it was just on the other side of the glass. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Curiosity, or maybe just plain stupidity, got the better of me. I sat up in bed and slowly turned to face the window. The rain was still coming down, and the lightning was flashing every few seconds, lighting up the room in these weird bursts. But the whisper, it had stopped, just like that. I stared at the window for what felt like forever, just waiting, barely even breathing. Part of me was relieved it had stopped, but another part of me was weirdly disappointed. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like I was half hoping to see something there, even though I knew how ridiculous that was. I mean, what did I expect to see? Some creepy face staring back at me? But there was nothing, just darkness, with the occasional flash of lightning. After a while, I started to feel a little silly. Here I was, staring out the window like a total idiot, letting my imagination get the best of me. So, I shook it off, lay back down, and forced myself to close my eyes. But just as I was starting to drift off again, I heard it, my name, clear as day, right outside my window. This time, I sat up so fast I almost gave myself whiplash. I stared at the window, my heart pounding, and I swear for a second I thought I saw something. Just a shadow, maybe, but it looked like a figure. Tall, thin, standing right outside, staring in. But every time the lightning flashed, it would disappear, and all I'd see was the rain streaming down the glass. I wanted to get up, go over to the window, and really look, but something held me back. Have you ever felt like that? Like every fiber in your body is telling you don't go over there. But at the same time, you're just dying to see what it is. It's like this mix of fear and curiosity that just eats away at you. I ended up just sitting there, staring at the window, waiting for the next flash of lightning, hoping, no, dreading that I'd see something staring back at me. But the flashes came and went, and nothing appeared. Eventually, the whispering stopped, and the storm settled down, and I finally managed to fall asleep, feeling like maybe it really was all in my head. But here's the thing, it happened again. The next storm came about a week later. I remember it clearly, because the forecast didn't even mention rain that day. It was supposed to be a calm night, clear skies and all. I'd almost forgotten about the whispering by then. I convinced myself it had been some kind of half-dream, just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I heard the first low rumble of thunder and saw those familiar flashes lighting up my bedroom, that same uneasy feeling crept back in. I was lying in bed, trying not to think about it, telling myself over and over, it's just a storm, nothing to worry about. But deep down, I think I already knew what was coming. And just like before, right as I was drifting off, I heard it, my name, whispered so soft, almost gentle, just outside my window. This time, I didn't sit up right away. I lay there, frozen, listening, hoping it would just go away on its own. But it didn't. The whisper kept coming, slowly growing more insistent, like whoever, or whatever, was out there wasn't going to leave until I acknowledged it. I tried to ignore it, but the sound was weirdly hypnotic, like it was pulling me in. Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer. I forced myself to sit up, my heart pounding so hard it was all I could hear. The rain was slashing against the glass, and lightning was flashing just often enough to light up the room in these short, creepy bursts. I stared at the window, barely daring to breathe, and waited. And then, right in the middle of a flash, I saw her. It was just for a second, barely long enough to register, but I swear there was a figure standing on the other side of the glass. She was pale, almost ghostly, with this blank, hollow look in her eyes, like she wasn't really seeing me, just looking at me. The flash ended, and she was gone. I sat there, staring at the window, waiting for the next flash, wondering if I'd actually seen anything at all. But when the lightning lit up the room again, the window was empty, just rain streaking down the glass. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that it was impossible for someone to be standing outside my window on the second floor. But that didn't stop me from pulling the blankets up to my chin, like a little kid hiding from the monster under the bed. I lay there, wide-eyed, barely daring to move, and somehow, I eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I tried to laugh it off. I even told myself, come on, it was just a trick of the light. A shadow maybe. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake that hollow look in her eyes. After that, I started dreading stormy nights. Whenever the sky got dark and the thunder started rolling in, my stomach would twist into knots. I'd sit in my room, pretending to be absorbed in whatever I was doing. But really, I was just waiting for that whisper. And, sure enough, every time a storm came, so did the whispering. It became almost like a ritual. I'd lie in bed, waiting for it, my heart pounding, my hands clenched into fists under the covers. And every time, right as I was starting to drift off, I'd hear it, my name, soft and persistent, coming from just outside my window. At first, I tried closing the blinds, thinking maybe that would help, but it didn't. I could still hear the whispering, and somehow, knowing she was out there, just beyond the thin layer of fabric, made it even worse. It was like she was waiting for me, like she knew I was scared, and she was feeding off it. Then, I tried sleeping in a different room. I thought maybe if I wasn't near the window, I wouldn't hear the whispering. But that didn't work either. I still heard her voice, calling my name, soft and insistent, like she was following me. One night, I even tried staying up all night, hoping that if I didn't go to sleep, she wouldn't come. But by 3 a.m, I was exhausted, and my eyelids were so heavy I couldn't keep them open. And as soon as I started drifting off, there it was again, the whisper calling my name, so close I could almost feel her breath on the back of my neck. It was like she was getting closer each time, like she was inching her way in, bit by bit. And the worst part? I had no idea what she wanted. Was she trying to warn me? Was she just playing with me? Or was it something worse, something I didn't even want to think about? The more I tried to ignore it, the more intense it became. The whispers grew louder, turning from soft pleas into almost desperate cries, like she was begging me to let her in. As the nights went on, the whispering seemed to seep deeper into my mind, like it was burrowing in. Every night, she was there waiting. The storms themselves started to feel unnatural. It was like they were scheduled, appearing only when I was about to fall asleep, as if the weather itself was in on it. I began to dread bedtime, like a kid with a monster in the closet. My whole evening routine changed. I'd put off going to bed until the absolute last minute, sometimes even sitting in the kitchen or on the couch, just hoping that maybe, if I stayed awake long enough, she'd eventually give up and leave me alone. But she never did. One night, the rain was so heavy that I could barely hear myself think. I had earbuds in, some podcast playing at max volume, trying to drown out the thunder and the pounding of the rain. But even then, I could hear it, faintly, under everything else. That whispering, saying my name, almost mournfully. I yanked out my earbuds, sitting up in bed with my heart racing. It was closer than ever, like she was no longer outside, but right there in the room with me. I kept telling myself, it's just my imagination. It's all in my head. But something deep inside knew it wasn't that simple. This wasn't something I could wish away. The room felt colder than usual, and I could see my breath in the dim light. I sat there, frozen, wondering what would happen if I finally got up and faced her, confronted her once and for all. But every time I thought about moving, something held me back. Fear? Curiosity? Or maybe some strange sense of self-preservation, like a voice inside was whispering, "Don't look. Whatever you do, don't look." I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the window. The rain was running down in thick streams, blurring the glass, so I couldn't see anything clearly. But in the back of my mind, I was sure, if I looked close enough, if I let myself really see, she'd be there, just beyond the glass, staring back at me. Finally, the storm started to die down, the thunder rolling off into the distance, and the whispers faded. I stayed awake until sunrise, afraid that if I closed my eyes, even for a second, she'd come back. I told myself I was safe now, that it was over for the night. But I knew deep down, she wasn't done with me yet. After that night, things changed. The storms started coming more frequently. Sometimes, they'd roll in out of nowhere, the sky going dark without any warning, like the weather itself was bending to her will. And every time, I knew she was out there, waiting. I started telling a few people about it, trying to make it sound like a joke, something funny and harmless. "Oh, yeah, there's this voice that calls my name during storms." I'd laugh, brushing it off, trying to make myself believe it was just a story. But nobody really took me seriously. They'd laugh along, say it was probably just the wind, or maybe some weird auditory hallucination. And, to be fair, I couldn't exactly blame them. Even to me, it sounded ridiculous. But that didn't change the fact that it was happening. One night, when the storm hit harder than ever, I finally decided I'd had enough. I was done being scared, done letting this thing controlled me. I was going to face her, see her up close, and finally understand what was happening. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in these brief, jagged bursts, and the thunder was so loud it felt like the walls were shaking. But I didn't care. I was done hiding. I got up from my bed, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Slowly, I walked toward the window, each step feeling heavier than the last. The whispers were louder than ever, practically echoing through the room, filling every corner with this eerie, pleading tone. I reached the window and took a deep breath, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the glass. It was icy cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt, and as soon as my fingers touched it, I felt a strange, pulling sensation like something was trying to drag me forward. And then, in one final flash of lightning, I saw her. She was right there, on the other side of the glass, closer than she'd ever been. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with hollow, empty eyes that stared into mine. She didn't look angry or even sad, just desperate, like she was trying to tell me something but couldn't find the words. For a split second, I felt a strange pang of sympathy. I almost wanted to reach out, to touch the glass and connect with her somehow. But then, as the lightning faded and the room plunged back into darkness, I saw her mouth move. She was saying my name over and over, her voice growing louder in my head, until it felt like she was screaming, even though her lips barely moved. I stumbled back, clutching my head, the room spinning around me as her voice filled every corner of my mind. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the storm ended. The rain stopped, the whispers faded, and I was left alone in the silence, gasping for breath. But I knew it wasn't over. That night changed everything. After that, it was like she was always with me, even during the day. I'd see her out of the corner of my eye, in reflections, shadows, anywhere there was glass. Every time, she'd be staring at me, her hollow eyes filled with that same pleading look, like she was waiting for me to do something. But I didn't know what she wanted, and honestly, I was too terrified to find out. Days passed, but things never felt normal again. She was always there, in the background, like a shadow that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just at night or in the rain anymore. She was there in every reflection, in every window, in the screen of my phone, even in the glass of a coffee shop door. At first, I tried to avoid anything reflective. I'd look away when I walked past mirrors, kept my blinds closed during the day, and even started covering my bathroom mirror with a towel. I figured if I couldn't see her, maybe I could pretend she wasn't real. But that only seemed to make her more persistent. One night, I thought I'd finally cracked. I'd covered every window, every reflective surface in my room. I even put a blanket over my laptop screen. I lay down, feeling a strange sense of relief, like maybe I'd finally outsmarted her. But as I drifted off to sleep, I heard it, clear as day, her voice. Please. It was just a single word, so faint I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time. Please. My eyes flew open, and there she was, somehow visible even with the blankets covering the windows. She wasn't outside. She was inside, closer than ever, standing right by my bed. Her face was inches from mine, her hollow eyes filled with desperation, her mouth moving soundlessly, like she was screaming in silence. I bolted upright, scrambling away from her, my heart pounding in my chest. But she didn't follow me. She just stood there, staring, her gaze empty and distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. I ran out of the room, barely able to breathe. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but I didn't even know who to call. What would I say? There's a ghost in my room, and she won't leave me alone? Instead, I ended up calling my best friend. I didn't tell him everything. I just said I'd been having nightmares, that I couldn't sleep. He tried to reassure me, told me it was probably stress, or maybe sleep paralysis. He even suggested I see a therapist, but I knew what I'd seen. This wasn't a dream or a trick of the mind. She was real, and no matter what I did, she wasn't going to leave me alone. After that, things only got worse. She didn't just appear at night anymore. She was there all the time, always watching, always waiting. I started seeing her everywhere, not just in reflections. She'd be there, standing in the corner of my eye, just barely visible, like a shadow that only came into focus when I wasn't looking directly at it. I became a wreck, constantly on edge, jumping at every little sound. I started avoiding people, too afraid they'd see the fear in my eyes, or worse, that they'd see her. I was barely sleeping, barely eating, just drifting through each day in a haze of fear and exhaustion. One night, after yet another sleepless night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't care what happened. I was going to confront her, face to face, once and for all. I sat on my bed, waiting. The rain was falling hard outside, thunder rumbling in the distance, and I could feel the air thickening with that familiar tension. I knew she would come. I just had to wait. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I sat there in the dark, staring at the window, listening to the steady rhythm of the rain. I kept my eyes fixed on the glass, willing myself not to look away, not to blink. I wanted her to know I was ready, that I wasn't afraid. But the truth was I was terrified. After what felt like hours, a flash of lightning lit up the room, and there she was, staring back at me from the window. Her face was as pale and lifeless as ever, her hollow eyes fixed on me with that same pleading look. Her lips moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear. But I didn't look away. I pressed my hand to the glass, feeling the cold seep into my skin, and I whispered, "What do you want?" Her eyes widened, her expression shifting, and for the first time, I thought I saw something. Pain? Sadness. In those empty, hollow eyes. She moved closer, her face inches from the glass, and for a moment, I thought she was going to answer. Then, in a whisper so soft it barely cut through the sound of the rain, she spoke. "Help me." The words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know what she meant, or why she was asking me. But in that moment, I felt a strange, overwhelming urge to help her, to do something, anything, to end whatever nightmare she was trapped in. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes darted to the side, to something just out of view, as if she was afraid someone was watching. Her expression grew desperate, and she mouthed a single word. "Run." My heart skipped a beat. I felt frozen, my hand still on the icy glass, my eyes locked onto hers. Run? But from what? She mouthed it again, more urgently this time. Run? The rational part of me wanted to listen. It was practically screaming at me to leave, to get as far away from that window as I could. But something in her expression held me there. The desperation in her eyes felt raw, almost human, like she was trying to protect me from something I couldn't see. I slowly pulled my hand away from the glass, but I couldn't make myself leave. Instead, I took a shaky step backward, never breaking eye contact. She stayed where she was, pressed against the glass, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Then, without warning, she vanished. 1 second, she was there, her pale face inches from mine, and the next she was gone, leaving only my own horrified reflection staring back at me. The silence that followed was deafening. I could still hear the rain tapping against the window, but it felt distant, almost muted. I was left alone in the dark, my heart pounding, the words, "Help me," and "Run," echoing in my mind. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? She was gone, but I had this horrible feeling that it wasn't over, that she'd be back, and that the next time I might not be so lucky. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the window, waiting for any sign of her return. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those hollow eyes filled with desperation. By the time morning came, I was exhausted, but I felt no relief. I knew that as soon as the next storm rolled in, she'd be back. Days turned into weeks, and every night, I waited. The storms came and went, but she didn't appear. I started to think that maybe it was over, that maybe she'd finally moved on. I even managed to convince myself that it had all been a bad dream, that I'd just imagined the whole thing. But deep down I knew better. And then one night, the rain came again. The rain poured down in torrents, drumming against the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and ominous, while flashes of lightning lit up the dark sky, casting eerie shadows in my room. As the storm grew in intensity, I felt the familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Sitting on my bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that she would return. I tried to keep myself occupied, scrolling through my phone, watching mindless videos, but the anxiety clawed at me. Each crack of thunder felt like a reminder of her presence, urging me to look at the window. Just after midnight, the storm reached its peak. The wind howled outside, and I could feel the temperature drop in my room. The air turned heavy, as if the storm was drawing closer. My heart raced as I finally forced myself to look at the window. When I did, I wasn't disappointed. There she was, just as before, her face a pale blur against the pouring rain. Her hollow eyes seemed even more frantic, her lips moving rapidly, as if she was screaming silently for me to hear. I felt a surge of panic as I stood frozen, caught between terror and an inexplicable need to know what she wanted. Then I saw it, a shadow creeping behind her. It was darker than the night itself, a shape that seemed to pulse and shift with the rhythm of the storm. My blood ran cold. Whatever it was, it felt wrong, like a presence that didn't belong. "Help me," she mouthed again, but this time her voice seemed to echo in my mind, clear and desperate. The shadow behind her loomed closer, stretching out as if it were reaching for her, and I could almost feel its cold grasp clawing at my chest. I took a step back, instinct kicking in. I had to get away. But where would I go? The window was the only escape, and I could see that whatever was behind her was inching closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I weighed my options. Suddenly, she turned her head, glancing over her shoulder at the shadow. Her expression twisted in fear, and she screamed silently, mouthing words I couldn't decipher. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to save her, to pull her back from the brink of whatever darkness was consuming her. "Don't let it take you," I yelled, though I knew she couldn't hear me. I pressed my hands against the glass, feeling the chill seep through to my fingertips. "Please." But she just stared back, her face contorted in terror as the shadow lunged at her. I felt an electric surge of fear shoot through me, and instinctively, I grabbed the edge of the window frame. "Run!" I screamed again, louder this time, willing her to hear me, to heed my warning. But just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone, disappearing into the storm with the shadow, leaving me alone in the dark. I stumbled backward, collapsing onto my bed, heart racing and breath coming in ragged gasps. What just happened? I buried my head in my hands, trying to wrap my mind around the horror of it all. The silence that followed was suffocating. Outside, the rain continued to beat against the window, but there was no sign of the storm's fury, no sign of her return. It was just me alone, left to ponder what I had just witnessed. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to ignore it, to carry on with my life as if everything was normal, but my nights were filled with anxiety, each storm a reminder of her face and the shadow that had consumed her. I found myself waking up at odd hours, heart pounding as if I were being pulled into a nightmare. I thought about seeking help, maybe talking to someone about what I had experienced, but fear held me back. What would I even say? "Hey, I think I'm being haunted by a ghost who might also be in danger." I could barely convince myself that it was real. Then came another stormy night. As the sky darkened, I could feel the tension mounting in the air. Thunder rumbled ominously, and I found myself pacing the floor of my room, eyes darting toward the window. Each flash of lightning was a reminder of her haunting presence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different, that something was about to change. The rain fell heavier than ever, drowning out all other sounds, until it felt like the world outside was completely submerged. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the sheets, listening to the relentless drumming against the glass. Every crack of thunder sent chills down my spine, but I couldn't look away from the window. And then I saw it. A figure, pale and fragile, slowly materialized through the sheets of rain. My heart dropped. It was her. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and desperate, and I felt a mix of dread and determination surge through me. "What do you want?" I whispered, knowing full well that she couldn't hear me, but it felt vital to ask. The whispers began again, soft at first, then growing louder, overlapping like a chorus. "Help me! Run! It's coming!" This time, I could see the shadow behind her, looming larger and darker, pulsating with a life of its own. I swallowed hard, paralyzed by fear. The figure in the window raised a trembling hand, reaching toward me, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to reach back, to grasp her hand and pull her to safety. But the shadow moved, its form shifting and distorting, and suddenly I was gripped by a new fear. I stumbled back, shaking my head as panic set in. "No, I can't go near that window. I can't. Don't let it take you." I shouted again, feeling the futility of my words as they were swallowed by the storm. Her eyes grew wider, filled with terror, and she turned her head as the shadow crept closer, tendrils of darkness reaching out for her. "Please!" I screamed, but the figure vanished again, leaving only darkness in her place. I felt sick. I sank onto my bed, my heart racing as the whispers faded into the background noise of the storm. The air felt thick with dread, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head. What was happening? Why was this happening to me? In the days that followed, I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but the shadows felt darker, and every time the sky turned gray, I was reminded of her. I stopped sleeping with the curtains open, hiding away from the window, like it was a portal to another world. I told myself it was just a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by the stress of life. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Then came another stormy night. It was worse than before. The rain lashed against the window like a beast trying to break free. I huddled under my blankets, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling of dread in my stomach. Just when I thought I could calm myself, I heard it again, a soft whisper, just outside the window, calling my name. I felt a chill creep through the room. As much as I tried to convince myself it was the wind or the rain, I knew better. My heart raced as I got out of bed, creeping toward the window, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. I reached the window and pulled the curtain aside, expecting to see nothing, but there she was, standing outside in the storm, soaked and shivering. Her eyes were wide with fear, and I could see the shadow lurking behind her, dark and formless, inching closer. "Help me," she mouthed again, her voice a haunting echo in my mind. The shadow moved closer, and I felt an intense wave of terror wash over me. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "Run," she screamed, though the sound didn't reach my ears. Instead, it pulsed through the glass, reverberating in my very bones. I hesitated, torn between the impulse to save her and the instinct to protect myself from the encroaching darkness. But as I looked in her eyes, I realized she wasn't just pleading for help. She was warning me. I felt the air around me thicken, a sense of suffocating dread weighing me down. With a sudden resolve, I turned and ran, stumbling back from the window, my heart racing. But just as I thought I was free, the glass shattered. I stood frozen as the glass fragments rained down around me, a shower of tiny shards glinting like sharp stars against the darkness of my room. My heart hammered in my chest, and the world around me spun. I couldn't process what had just happened. I could only feel a primal instinct to escape. In the confusion, I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of my bed. My mind raced. Had the shadow done this? Was it trying to get to me? The thought sent another wave of panic through me. I turned away from the window, knowing I had to get out of this room, out of this house, before whatever was outside reached in. But as I looked away, I caught sight of the figure again, now closer than before. The pale face of the girl stared back at me from the remnants of the shattered glass, her eyes wide and pleading, but now they were tinged with desperation. The shadow was right behind her, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to pulse and breathe. "Don't let it take you," she screamed, and I felt her urgency resonate within me. I turned, bolting toward the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through my veins as I yanked on the handle, frantically trying to force it open. The air felt heavy, thick with malevolence, and I could sense the shadow inching closer. I could hear it now, a low, guttural growl that echoed in the corners of my mind, whispering threats I couldn't understand. I was trapped. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted into the darkness, feeling utterly powerless. "What do you want from me?" Silence. And then, just as suddenly as the chaos had begun, the growling stopped. I turned back toward the window, and the figure stood there, completely still. The shadow behind her seemed to draw back as if it was waiting for something, the tension hanging in the air like an unspoken word. "Please," she begged, her voice a haunting whisper. "You need to listen to me. It's not safe. You need to leave." "Leave? Where?" I yelled, feeling the weight of my confusion and fear boil over. "You're the one out there. Why can't you just come in?" The girl's expression changed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope. "I can't. It's not safe for me. But you," her voice broke off, and I could see her trembling. "You need to run. You need to find the light." "What light? What are you talking about?" I felt dizzy, overwhelmed, as her words sank in. The shadow seemed to shift behind her, pulsing with an eerie energy. "Just run. Find the light. Don't let it take you." The urgency in her voice snapped something inside me. I turned back to the door, my hands shaking as I pulled at the handle once more. "I need to get out." I braced my foot against the door, pushing with all my strength, and finally, it swung open with a loud creak. I stumbled out into the hallway, my heart racing. I couldn't hear the storm anymore. It was drowned out by the pounding of my heart and the rush of adrenaline. The house was eerily quiet, and the shadows loomed large in the dim light. I turned to my left, heading toward the stairs, when I felt a sudden chill wash over me. The darkness behind me thickened, and I could sense the shadow pursuing me, a menacing presence that seemed to whisper my name, coaxing me to stop. But I couldn't stop. I ran down the stairs, my footsteps echoing against the walls. I could feel the air growing colder, the light from the small window at the bottom flickering like a dying flame. I knew I had to reach the front door, but a wave of cold washed over me, and I paused for a brief second, feeling the darkness closing in. Just then, I heard a voice, a different voice, cutting through the fear like a knife. "You can't escape," it hissed, and I felt my resolve waver. But the girl's warning echoed in my mind. "Find the light." I shook off the fear, focused on the front door, and propelled myself forward. With a burst of energy, I reached the door and fumbled for the handle. My fingers trembled as I pulled it open, and the air outside hit me like a wave. It was dark, but the rain had lessened, and I could see the outlines of the trees in the distance. I stepped out, feeling the cool air wash over me. I turned back to the house, half expecting to see the girl at the window one last time, but the darkness had swallowed her whole. As I stood there, catching my breath, I heard a low growl behind me. The shadow had followed me outside, its form twisting and writhing in the night. I took off running, the gravel crunching under my feet as I sprinted toward the trees, desperate for escape. I had no idea where I was going, but the pull of the shadow behind me was a powerful motivator. The whispers intensified, drowning out the sound of my breath as I pushed myself to run faster. What was it? What did it want from me? I glanced back over my shoulder and saw it growing closer, its shape shifting and morphing into something grotesque. I turned back around and focused on the trees ahead, a beacon of safety in the dark. Then, as I ran, I noticed something glimmering ahead, a faint light piercing through the darkness, illuminating the path like a lighthouse guiding me home. That was it, the light. I sprinted toward it, the shadow hot on my heels. It snarled and hissed, its voice wrapping around me like a fog, taunting me. "You can't run forever. You're mine." "No," I shouted back, pushing myself to reach the light. I could see it getting closer, feel its warmth radiating as I drew nearer. Finally, I burst into a clearing, and there it was, a flickering lantern suspended in the air, casting an ethereal glow around me. I felt the darkness retreat, the shadow screeching in frustration as it skidded to a halt just outside the light's reach. Breathless, I stumbled forward, feeling the warmth wash over me like a wave of safety. The lantern pulsed with a golden hue, and I could see the figure from the window standing at the edge of the light. "Stay in the light," she called, her voice clear and urgent. "Don't let it pull you back. You have to fight." I turned to face the shadow, feeling my heart race as it writhed just outside the perimeter of the light. The whispers grew louder, overlapping like a chorus of voices, and I could see its true form. The features twisted and contorted into a mask of rage and despair. "Come back," it howled, and I felt a tugging sensation deep within me, like it was reaching for my very soul. "No," I shouted defiantly, stepping closer to the lantern. I felt the warmth enveloping me, bolstering my strength against the encroaching darkness. With renewed determination, I looked straight at the shadow. "You can't have me. I'm not afraid of you," the shadow hissed, recoiling as if struck, but I could feel it gathering strength for one final push. I remembered the girl, the urgency in her voice, the way she had warned me. She had faced this darkness before, and now it was my turn. I reached out, grasping the lantern, feeling its power surge through me. "I won't let you take anyone else," I yelled, and with a surge of energy, I lifted the lantern high, the light bursting forth like a beacon. The light flared brilliantly, illuminating the surrounding trees and casting long shadows that danced around me. The shadow, caught in the glow, writhed and shrieked, a cacophony of rage and despair that echoed in the stillness of the night. I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me, as if the lantern was amplifying my determination, feeding off my will to fight. "Stay back," I shouted again, my voice strong and resolute. The shadow recoiled further, its form shifting and twisting, as if trying to find a way to escape the brilliance that surrounded me. I took a step forward, feeling the warmth radiate from the lantern. The girl stood beside me, her eyes wide with encouragement. "Remember what I said? You have the light inside you," she urged, and in that moment, I felt an understanding wash over me. The darkness I faced was not just an external entity. It was a manifestation of my fears, doubts, and the anguish I had carried for far too long. With that realization, I held the lantern tightly and closed my eyes, focusing on the light within me. I thought of every fear that had plagued me, the sleepless nights, the feeling of isolation, the haunting whispers that followed me. Each thought fueled the glow of the lantern, making it burn brighter, illuminating even the deepest corners of the darkness. When I opened my eyes again, the shadow was closer, its shape shifting and distorting. It lunged at me, and I raised the lantern instinctively. The light exploded outward, a shock wave that pushed the shadow back, forcing it to retreat into the trees. I could feel the power of the light, a warmth that promised safety and strength. "Keep going. Don't let it corner you," the girl shouted, her encouragement driving me forward. I took another step, feeling emboldened. The darkness loomed, a mass of swirling fear, but I wouldn't let it engulf me. I could see it now, its true form, a collection of shadows and despair, a creature born from the remnants of my own nightmares. "Leave me alone," I yelled, and with that declaration, I swung the lantern again, the light expanding to encompass more of the clearing. The shadow hissed in response, its whispers growing frantic. "You think you can defeat me? I'm a part of you," it growled, its voice echoing in the darkness. "You can't escape yourself." I hesitated for just a moment, but the girl's gaze fixed on me, her expression fierce. "You have to believe you can. You are stronger than this." I took a deep breath, grounding myself in her words. Yes, I had felt trapped and powerless for too long, but I had also faced the storm and survived. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to let fear dictate my fate any longer. "I am not afraid of you," I shouted, and with that conviction, I thrust the lantern forward. The light burst forth like a flare, illuminating the clearing and casting the shadow in sharp relief. It screamed, a sound so raw and filled with anguish that I almost faltered, but I held my ground. The shadow lashed out, but the light kept it at bay, flickering but resolute. "You cannot hide from me," it screeched, trying to slip past the barrier of light. "You are mine. You have always been mine. No, I refuse to let you control me," I shouted back, feeling the strength within me surge. The lantern pulsed in my hand, responding to my will, and I realized I could channel all my energy into it. "Enough of this," I yelled, my voice echoing through the clearing. I raised the lantern high and let out a burst of energy, directing it at the shadow. The light expanded, wrapping around the dark form like chains, binding it in place. The shadow writhed, the whispers now panicked and frantic. "No, let me go. You can't do this," it screamed, but the more it fought, the stronger the light became. I stepped closer, feeling the warmth radiating from the lantern envelop me like a protective cocoon. I could see the shadow weakening, its form becoming more transparent as the light broke through its darkness. "You are nothing without my fear," I declared, feeling an overwhelming sense of liberation. "I am not afraid of you." With one final surge of strength, I thrust the lantern toward the heart of the shadow, and it erupted in a brilliant flash of light. The clearing was engulfed in brilliance, and for a moment, I felt weightless, free from the burdens I had carried. The shadow screamed, its form dissipating in the light, becoming nothing more than wisps of smoke that melted into the night. The whispers faded away, leaving behind a profound silence, a stillness that was both foreign and comforting. I stood there, breathing heavily, the lantern still glowing softly in my hand. The girl smiled at me, her from beginning to fade like the shadow. "You did it," she whispered, her voice warm and soothing. "You faced your fear, but what about you?" I asked, feeling a wave of sorrow wash over me. "You helped me. Are you going back to the darkness?" She shook her head, her expression resolute. "I'll be okay. I'm part of this now, but I'll always be here to help others like you." She stepped back, and I felt the warmth of the lantern surrounding me, a reminder of my victory over the darkness. "Thank you," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "For everything." With a final nod, she faded into the light, leaving me alone in the clearing, the gentle glow of the lantern illuminating my surroundings. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of fear finally lifted from my shoulders. I turned to face the path back home, the trees parting to reveal the way. I walked forward, the lantern guiding my steps, the night around me peaceful and quiet. As I moved, I could still feel the echoes of the darkness behind me, but they no longer held power over me. I had faced my fears and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me next. As I walked along the winding path back home, the cool night air wrapped around me, a soothing balm to the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Each step felt lighter, each breath deeper, as if the weight of the world had finally lifted. Yet, a nagging thought lingered in the back of my mind. Had I truly defeated the darkness, or was it merely lying in wait, biding its time until I was vulnerable again? I glanced back at the clearing, half expecting to see the shadow re-emerge, its dark tendrils reaching out for me once more. But the lantern's warm glow illuminated the path, casting away the encroaching darkness. I shook my head, trying to push aside the doubt that crept in like an unwelcome visitor. "You faced it," I told myself firmly. "You're stronger than it." But what did strength mean exactly? Was it the ability to confront our fears head on, or was it learning to live with them, understanding that they could always return? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface of my own fears, like peeling back the layers of an onion. There was still so much more to uncover. I could see my house in the distance, a cozy silhouette against the backdrop of the night. The lights inside twinkled invitingly, promising warmth and safety. But would I ever feel safe again? I couldn't help but wonder if every thunderstorm that rolled in would bring back the whispers, the shadows, and the hollow-eyed figure at my window. Would the rain trigger memories of that terrifying confrontation? As I reached the porch, I paused, the wooden boards creaking beneath my feet. A part of me longed to flee inside, to shut the door on the night and the memories, but another part hesitated. The lantern flickered in my hand, its light steady and bright. I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to confront the fear that lingered within me, not just the external shadow that had haunted me. Wasn't it easier to run? I thought, remembering the countless times I had wanted to hide from my feelings, the times I had let fear dictate my actions. But running wouldn't help me heal. I had to face what lay inside me, just as I had faced the shadow in the clearing. As I opened the door, I was struck by a wave of nostalgia. The familiar smells of home enveloped me, the faint scent of lavender from the candles, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingering from earlier in the day. But there was something else, too, a fleeting chill that danced across my skin, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me with a firm click. The cozy glow of the lamps was a stark contrast to the dark, stormy night outside. I walked through the living room, the soft fabric of the couch inviting me to sink in and let the events of the night wash away. But my mind raced with questions. What if the darkness wasn't just outside? What if it had somehow slipped in with me? I shook my head again, trying to dismiss the thoughts that threatened to spiral out of control. "You're safe," I whispered to myself. "You face the darkness. You have the light." But as I settled onto the couch, the weight of exhaustion pressed down on me. The lantern flickered in my hand, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I placed it on the coffee table, its glow reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Am I truly free? I wondered. Or is this just the calm before the storm? I turned my gaze toward the window, the rain still pouring down in sheets. The rhythmic sound of the droplets was soothing, yet it felt like a countdown to something inevitable. As I sat there, I could almost hear the whispers return, a faint echo of what had haunted me. Am I strong enough to face it again? And then it happened. The lights flickered once, twice, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, chilling me to the bone. My heart raced as the familiar sensation of dread clawed its way back into my chest. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see the pale figure once more, its hollow eyes watching me from the other side. "Please no," I whispered, gripping the edge of the couch tightly. "Not again." The lantern dimmed for a moment, the flame flickering as if caught in an unseen draft. I reached for it, my fingers trembling. What if the darkness wasn't just a figment of my imagination? What if it was lurking, waiting for me to let my guard down? But just as quickly as the fear flooded in, I felt something shift inside me. "You're not alone," I reminded myself, recalling the girl in the clearing and the strength I had felt while facing the shadow. "You can do this." Taking a deep breath, I stood up and approached the window, the light from the lantern spilling onto the floor behind me. My heart pounded as I reached for the curtain, pulling it aside to peer out into the stormy night. The rain blurred the view, but I could see the trees swaying violently in the wind. "Face it," I murmured, drawing on the courage I had found before. "Face your fears." With determination, I opened the window just a crack, the sound of the storm flooding into the room. The cold air hit me, sending shivers down my spine. "You don't control me," I yelled into the night, my voice firm and defiant. And then, just as I was about to close the window, I caught a glimpse of something in the darkness. A pale figure stood at the edge of the treeline, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I felt a jolt of panic surge through me, but instead of backing away, I held my ground. "I won't let you in," I shouted, my voice echoing against the howling wind. The figure tilted its head, as if considering my words, and in that moment, I saw something shift in its expression. Was it sorrow? Regret? "Let me help you," it whispered, the voice almost drowned out by the storm. "You don't have to face this alone." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of connection. Could this figure truly understand the weight of my burdens? Or was it merely a trick of the storm, a deceptive whisper meant to draw me back into darkness? "Why should I trust you?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my resolve. The figure stepped closer, the rain falling in sheets around it. Yet somehow, it remained untouched by the deluge. "I was once like you," it said softly, the sorrow in its voice echoing my own feelings of despair. "But I found the light, and you can too. You just have to let go of your fear." As it spoke, the lantern behind me flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls. I felt torn, caught between the fear of what the figure represented and the hope of what it could offer. Was it really possible to find peace in this chaos? Could I truly let go of the weight I had carried for so long? With a trembling hand, I reached out, allowing the light from the lantern to spill forth, illuminating the darkened corners of the night. The figure's gaze met mine, and I felt a rush of warmth wash over me, as if the fear I had held for so long was finally beginning to dissolve. "Let go," it urged, its voice a soothing balm amidst the storm. "Embrace the light, and together we can banish the darkness." I took a deep breath, feeling the power of the lantern coursing through me. This was my moment. I had faced the shadow, and now I was ready to confront the fears that had haunted me for so long. "Okay," I whispered, my voice steadier now. "I'm ready." In that instant, the figure smiled, and as I stepped closer, I felt a surge of energy envelop me, filling me with courage and clarity. The darkness that had once held me captive began to recede, replaced by the warmth of the lantern's glow. I knew that this was just the beginning, a journey of self-discovery and healing that would require strength and resilience. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As I closed the window and turned away from the night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I would continue to confront my fears, no matter how dark they might seem. The whispers might return, the shadows might loom. But now I knew I had the light within me to guide my way. And with that realization, I stepped into my home, ready to face the new dawn, knowing that no matter how dark the night might get, I would always have the light to see me through. If you actually enjoyed these stories, please subscribe and leave us a comment to the next horror story you want us to tell. Till then, see you in the next one.